This is my audience. Hello everyone, my name is Hope Scott, and the topic that I chose for my call to action speech is why violent prisoners should receive the maximum prison sentence. This is my visual aid. I actually found this documentary. It's called State Prisons on Netflix. I highly recommend it. It was very instrumental in my research today. Alright, let's get started. In 2016 alone, 259,811 people were convicted of violent crimes in the United States. This was reported by the Bureau of Justice Statistics. Violent crimes are currently classified as rape, murder, rape, sexual assault, robbery, assault, and battery. These are just the minimum. Of course, we have things such as arson, threatening the president, etc. There are minimum and maximum sentencing to each crime available. These are set forth by the courts, the Supreme Court, district courts, etc. Some of it depends upon the state you're in, but most of it is federal. So here are our maximum sentences currently in our prison system as follows. Involuntary manslaughter brings a maximum of 6 years in prison. Manslaughter in general is 10 years. Bank robbery, 20 years max served. Bank robbery with a weapon, such as a gun, knife, etc., 25 years. Human slavery and human trafficking bring 20 years. Spreading AIDS or another STD when knowing that you carry it is 10 years in jail. Selling and producing child pornography is 20 years, and threatening the president is 5 years. However, these are all debatable because it depends upon many factors such as weapons used, spontaneous versus premeditated crimes, and use of a vehicle and other things. The prison population is growing at such a fast rate now. There are more prisons nationwide than there are colleges and universities. That is crazy, and that needs to change immediately. The 2016 presidential election brought forth many changes and reforms to our prison system. Our now president, Donald Trump, voted to keep the prisons privatized. So that means that the government does not have as much control over it, and the money that is being brought in through every prisoner, which is $24,000 a year to house and feed a prisoner, an inmate, it is going into wealthy people's pockets instead of going into other programs for inmates like it should. There are many things that need to change in our prison system, but the biggest area that needs reformation is sentencing. Like I said earlier, there are minimum and maximum sentencing to each, and that's great for non-violent crimes such as drugs, prostitution, and traffic violations, parole, etc. That's, of course, all dependent upon numerous factors that go into that. These inmates mostly have been spending time behind bars for far too long. If you look at prisoner inmates from the 1950s, they were convicted of crimes such as possessing marijuana, distributing marijuana, stuff like that, stuff that probably nowadays would not even send you to jail. It'd be mostly a fine, a class, etc. These people do not need to be in prison. You know who needs to be in prison? Violent criminals. There are many programs out there for inmates, and those are all great, but we need to ask ourselves, why are we doing this, and at what cost to the community? During my research, I came across the story of an inmate who was just released from an Arizona state prison. He was sentenced to 50 years for killing 6 people. There are 2 programs that he utilized to get out early. The first was a college program. For every degree, whether it's a bachelor's, master's, associate's, trade school, or vocational, that takes the equivalent amount of time off. So if he completed a bachelor's degree, he would be out 4 years earlier. That alone is insane. The second way he got out earlier was by using a good behavior program. So say someone was sentenced to 1 year in prison. For the first 6 months, they were great, good behavior every day. Well, guess what? They're now being released due to this federal program, which they actually tried to repeal back in 2011, but it was shot down by Congress. I find that to be very interesting. This man was released after 6.5 years in prison. He was sentenced to 50 for killing 6 people. How is that even a thing? We need to ask ourselves, At what cost to the community are these prisoners and inmates being released? Then we come across situations like Brock Turner, the convicted rapist. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison for sexually assaulting and raping an unconscious woman. He served 3 of those months. Then during my research, I found out about this college student who was able to hack into a national database. He was able to release only 50 scientific data articles to the public for their own private use, and he was sentenced to 50 years in jail for hacking. Those 2 cases need to be flipped. You've got a violent prisoner, a violent crime, rape, sexual assault, which is currently classified, and then you've got hacking. Not even a domestic terrorism incident, nothing like that. We need to ask ourselves, why aren't those 2 situations flipped? And why was Brock Turner able to be released early? Also, again, because of the good behavior program. Someone like him should not have been released after 3 months, and this young hacker should not serve 50 years behind jail for just aiming to make these scientific articles public. How can we progress as a nation when our justice system and courts are so backwards and behind the times? We fail to protect our general public every time we release a violent criminal back into society without educating and preparing them to come back into the world. Of course, there are restorative justice programs. Actually, I learned about this when I was a freshman in college the first time. Restorative justice has a few great programs like connecting victims and offenders, writing letters, meetings. I remember hearing about this woman whose daughter was murdered, and the convicted murderer was able to write her a letter in apology. Of course, that's all good and grand, but again, at what cost to the community? Could we be doing more harm than good in our restorative justice programs? So we can argue the ethics of prisons all day long, but let's take a look at the facts. Did you know that a violent convicted criminal, once released from prison, is 50 times more likely to commit a violent crime in his first year being released? This is why we need longer and maximum prison sentences for violent offenders. When this is finally enacted, we will have safer communities, less crime, less people going in and out of the system, etc., etc. What I'm calling on you guys to do today is to get informed. Research this for yourself, develop your own opinion. So I could talk all day about it, but only you know where you're going to stand. Get involved. Get involved in local politics. I've been doing that since I was 18, so a few years now. It's not that hard. You can write to your senators, write to your congressmen, go to town hall meetings, bring up prison reform and whatnot. And then I ask you to campaign. Again, go work for a local governor or representative's office. Volunteer for a little bit. See how it really is on the inside. It's pretty neat. Alright guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope I was able to teach you all a little bit about prison reform and the needed changes that need to happen. Thank you.